Is this tilted slightly? I think it is. Welcome to the pit. For those that don't know, I teach golf lessons to kids here in New York City. This week I took on both the Saturday and Sunday shift, which means I did not have time to record this at home. So I'm using my hour-long lunch break to do this episode. So let's start with...
So I am confusion.
I'm confused on how anybody but C9 was ever going to be the favorite going into this playoffs. Yes, Golden Guardians has looked good. Yes, C9 has dropped single games to both NRG and Team Liquid, hence why in the bracket stage, which we'll go into a little bit more depth later, they did choose to play the winner of EG versus TSM. But how anybody thought that Cloud9 is not the favorite going into this playoffs when they haven't lost a best-of-5 series and God knows how long is beyond me. I don't get it. How do we keep just doing this every year where it seems like people forget that best of ones are way different than best of fives? And yes, C9 has looked a little bit shaky, but they are still the undisputed top dog, and which honestly I'm really happy that they were able to beat Golden Guardians in their tiebreaker game to guarantee that they're first seed, right where they should be. If anybody wants to beat them, you need to beat the #1 team and the best team in the league as we go into playoffs and C9 trying to win their third straight LCS title.
I know it hurts sometimes, but you'll get over it.
With LCS playoffs, we also have to give an in memoriam section to the two teams who have been eliminated from the LCS this year, starting with our 10th place team, the team that somehow still gets a win whenever all the pressure is off, Immortals. I don't think we really need to reflect on this past season, but we do need to acknowledge whether any of these individual players realistically have a chance of being on a LCS roster next year, or whether most will be replaced. Solo, I think, is highly questionable at this point. The question is whether we have any decent academy top laners to come up through. I think he provides a solid bedrock, but it's never going to be enough to win you an LCS title. Kenvi has unfortunately had his shot, and barring closer falling off the face of the planet, the split was the worst jungler in the LCS and has some serious stage fright issues to overcome because he just plays different when the pressure's off, and that's not going to be anything that ever changes for him. In mid lane, Balulu actually wasn't all that bad. His laning wasn't great. I mean, he's still very clear bottom half of the LCS, but like, it might be enough to the point where he drops down to Academy for a split, comes back and gets a spot in the LCS a little bit later. Give him some time. Honestly, maybe he can come around. Tactical, I think, guaranteed himself a spot on a starting LCS roster this year. He played lights out a good bit of the time. Yes, he still has his positioning issues, but I mean, let's be honest. Tactical is still a top 10 ADC in North America. Unless you import a bunch of players that are ahead of him, he should be starting on a roster this upcoming season. And even then, if I'm a bottom tier team and you need a role player to fit in, he could be a good guy. You just got to keep him in a good mental state. Treats, after watching this guy absolutely smack talk every North American player and criticizing them nonstop, to see him fall flat on his face this split and have to eat some of those words and make mistakes that he was criticizing others for. Karma's a bitch, ain't it? For the Immortals org themselves, I'll be honest with you, I hope they sell this offseason. I've seen nothing promising from this org and management. The one person that I knew within the org, Jordan Sherman, is no longer with them. They've now finished 9th or 10th in 4 straight splits, which technically allows Riot the chance to kick them out of the league if they want to, or at least open up the hearing to hear them out and see whether they have a business plan and then force them to. Look, it's not going to happen. Riot's never going to force them out. Unfortunately, Riot just doesn't want to set that precedent, and yes, it would have bad effects for all the other teams in the league, knowing that Riot controls everything, but they have this entire time. So at some point, I don't know, I just want somebody to come in and buy out Immortals and just bring some life into this team, or not this team, but like to the slot, please.
I know it hurts sometimes, but you'll get over it.
The one that nobody and their mother expected at the beginning of this season. There's no chance that anybody had Flyquest missing playoffs, and it is now officially the single biggest roster letdown in LCS history. The other contenders would likely be last year's Team Liquid, but they notably still made playoffs, and yes, they didn't make Worlds, but they still finished 4th. So overall, yes, a disappointment, even though expectations were like sky high for them. It's not the same as this. Cloud9 2020 notably falling off at the end of the split, but even then they were dominant at the beginning. Yes, that was like a collapse towards the end, but like this is just, in terms of a roster letdown, this is still the biggest letdown in LCS history, bar none. All of these players are individually talented enough to still be in the LCS next year. There's like, yes, they're in bad form right now. Spica's the only one that you could look at and be like, okay, he's had 2 different rosters and kind of not been able to put it together with a few. But even then, like, I think Spica deserves another shot in the LCS easily. It's just a matter of these players didn't come together. It didn't work out. And personally, I put a lot of that blame and onus on coaching staff. For whatever reason, they just weren't able to get these players together. Now we have to wait in the offseason to see what roster moves go on, what Papa Smithy and others decide. But I know there were some people criticizing Papa, and yes, management will always have some blame in this. But when you go back to the beginning of the year, or even the beginning of summer, and you say, okay, management made these moves, are they upgrades or are they better than what they had before? Are they putting this org on a good path going forward? I don't think anybody's going to deny that these were all good moves. So it's not on management to a certain extent. I honestly just don't know. I don't have an explanation as to why this roster was so bad on the LCS stage. I wish all the players best of luck, but there's no chance that this roster even stays majorly intact, because then you'll see a lot of criticism towards upper management.
You know what really grinds my gears?
The fact that viewership was as low as it was this split, and I honestly, the player strike definitely had its impact on this. I'm not going to deny that. Starting 2 weeks later than what people were expecting was definitely a problem, but that's not the main thing. Obviously, yes, us not performing on the international stage is a bit of a problem, but the LCS product itself is, quite frankly, the best it's been outside of the games individually than it's been for a long time. I blame the weekdays. I get that 10 hours of League of Legends for fans that are both watching the LEC and the LCS is a lot. I'm not going to deny that, and I do think that Riot is right on that. But what they were wrong on was the fact that there is not a weekday audience that is willing to turn out in North America to watch League of Legends. And that does not mean you move the games earlier to play for a European audience like they wanted to do. I'm sorry, this is a North American league. You cater to majority North American fans and have the best games a little bit later in the day. But no, weekdays need to be done. I don't ever want to see an LCS game on a Wednesday ever again. I don't mind weekdays for playoffs if you need to have like 4 days of games, but we need to go back to Saturday, Sunday right now. That has to happen next split. If it's not, then I'm questioning every single decision that LCS management is making. I'm questioning all leadership that's involved with the LCS as to why there's, at this point, I don't believe any numbers that they could possibly give us, given how wrong the data set was going into the split and the choice for weekdays. So I'm honestly pissed. I raised concerns at this decision early on in winter or during Worlds whenever this came out. I was talking to Greg Kim, who was with CLG at the time. We had a long form conversation on it that was very productive and brought up all sides, but I still constantly go back to the fact that there's a reason why sports, why events are held on weekends. You don't do it on a weekday because people can't engage with it. They just can't. They might passively watch it. They might throw it up on a Twitch stream. But at the end of the day, we are 40,000 people less during regular season games. And I blame the majority of that on weekdays in combination with the fact that we can't perform internationally. And until you change expectations that the domestic product needs to be its own entertaining thing, then you're always going to have problems. But with us swapping to 3 international formats sometime soon, likely, I mean, even that is into question. So I don't know what you do, but what you definitely do is get the LCS back on goddamn weekends. Before we formally transition into pure playoffs talk, I do want to cover the Dignitas 100 Thieves tiebreaker. I talked about the Golden Guardians C9-1, but what about this tiebreaker for 7th place that people were memeing? Can either of these teams make a run in playoffs? I'm still going to say, yeah, on 100 Thieves. They were close in their Golden Guardians game. It's literally just a matter of whether Closer shows up and Quid can keep his stuff together. But for those that don't know, there was actually news yesterday. Doublelift tweeted out that he is in the hospital right now for internal bleeding. I'm not a doctor. I don't know what this means, but apparently he was playing with it this entire past week and still playing well. So I'm assuming this isn't going to impact 100 Thieves and LCS for playoffs, but that's irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. I really hope the Doublelift gets better, because your health is more important than any stupid video game that we were all playing, and that is priority number 1. That said, Dignitas, for whatever reason, has 100 Thieves number. Like, Quid and Closer just couldn't perform against Jensen and Santorin, and 2 veteran players that just know how to shut down a rookie and a slumping player. But 100 Thieves has identified a clear playstyle where it's like, okay, we are going to pick around double lift and bottom lane. It's just a matter of whether we play smart fights and play well around that win condition, around that style of draft. And as of right now, they're not, but I still have a little bit of faith. As for Dignitas, they could. Jensen hasn't missed Worlds, I think, ever, to my knowledge. So Dignitas showing that, once again, they could go on a run here if they truly get the right blessing. Let's move on to the formal playoff bracket. Before I preview any individual matches, I feel it's important to just give my full rundown on the entire bracket and how I think this playoffs is ultimately going to shake out. This is my LCS playoff bracket prediction. Team Liquid is going to beat Golden Guardians, NRG in a best of 5. I think people are going to be hyped up on NRG, but at the end of the day, we have not seen the TL roster in a best of 5, and I truly believe that Piosik, Core JJ, and Summit are going to be a force to be reckoned with. I think EG just absolutely blows TSM out of the water, and that just is what it is, which means that TSM goes down to play Dignitas, and then NRG faces 100 Thieves. Then next up is actually going to be, I believe, the losers bracket match first, of which 100 Thieves is beating a slumping NRG after they've lost to TL.
Okay.
Now, is this a opium answer, or is this a real David answer?
It's always
That is also real, because I do think that NRG is going to slump. Like, if they lose a close game or close series to TL, I do 100% think that they drop down. Dignitas is going to blow TSM out of the water. Unfortunately, TSM's run ends here, and that just is what it is.
That's really sad, because Insanity cut his hair, and then he's on a slump now. So
yeah, C9 is going to obliterate EG. It's not even going to be close.
It will not be fun.
No, it will not. Which means that EG plays 100 Thieves, and then I think Golden Guardians is well versed enough at this point in best of 5s that they should be able to beat TL. But I truly believe that TL is going to be an incredible best of 5 team and one to beat. So TL upsets Golden Guardians. Golden Guardians then drops down. I then think Golden Guardians stomps Dignitas. 100 Thieves etches out a very close win over Evil Geniuses. Okay. Then I'm happy. 100 Thieves has made it to Worlds at this point. They're going. That's fine. Golden Guardians is going to beat them. Even though we saw a close series that I think 100 Thieves can possibly pull off this upset, as is evident by their last game. I do think that they unfortunately end up in 4th, but represent North America well in that tiebreaker. And then on top of that, in the winners bracket, I think that TL versus C9 is actually a very heavy TL favored series. So I'm going to take Team Liquid to beat Cloud9 in the upper bracket. Cloud9 gets a reality check going down to the lower bracket, stomping Golden Guardians to play Team Liquid again, ultimately leading to C9 coming back with an amazing revenge arc, beating their demons, beating Team Liquid, and winning the entire LCS split. We have 2 playoff matches this week, noticeably on Thursday and Friday, the first of which being, at least in my opinion, the best matchup that we're going to see within the first 2 weekends of playoffs so far, at least, which is starting with Team Liquid versus NRG. 2 teams that noticeably had Cloud9's number, but against each other. I'm genuinely curious to see how this goes. NRG, we've seen them in playoffs the last 2 years. They can beat some of the lower teams, but historically, they've kind of fallen apart in playoffs, and that was mostly at the hands of Luger and Poom, who would just kind of disappear. Palafox and Contracts would play decently well, and Dokla has a pretty set standard of how he's going to play. This split, noticeably, he's been a little bit worse for wear than prior splits, but even against the game on Cloud9, he still has those pop-off moments. But they're going against a Team Liquid who we have never seen at a best of 5 yet. They missed playoffs last split, and this roster has not changed at all, barring APA coming in, and APA actually having the most recent best of 5 experience with Team Liquid Academy, but that's a whole other different animal. So now we are into the formal best of fives. If I'm going role by role, Summit obviously has an advantage over Dokla unless Dokla has a pop-off series. In jungle, I do favor Pyosik over Contracts, but the thing about Contracts and Palafox is if you catch them on the right day, they're going to take over this series, and it's not even going to be close, and Pyosik is going to look like one of the worst junglers in the league. So there's a chance of that happening, but I still think it ultimately does favor Pyosik. Mid lane, though, even though APA has been playing decently well, he's come back down to earth a little bit. So I do give the advantage over to Palafox, who is notably one of the top 4 mids in the league, in my opinion, especially these last few weeks. Even whenever NRG was still performing bad, Palafox is still making pretty good plays. Bot lane, Core JJ and Yeon. One of the best duos of bot lane in the LCS right now. I think they're going to be good come playoffs. Core JJ, I will always put my faith in. But FBI and Ignar have a chance. I mean, look, Ignar's no stranger to these best of 5 moments, has played decently well. And FBI has had some pop-off early game moments and also some in-team moments. Overall, though, the determining factor of this series, honestly, is just who shows up early on in playoffs, because we don't know what to fully expect from 2 teams that are very streaky. So my prediction personally, 3-1 Team Liquid in this first series, which would mean that NRG would go on to play 100 Thieves in the losers bracket, which we'll talk about next week, and Team Liquid would go on to play Golden Guardians. The other matchup that we will see this weekend that I don't want to spend too much time ultimately talking on is TSM versus Evil Geniuses. Evil Geniuses have looked pretty good. I believe Shaden is actually going to be starting for playoffs for them. I'd be shocked if Armeo came back in, given how EG has performed this last week. Jojo Pune, easily the best mid laner alongside Gory in the LCS. I think this is a complete mismatch. Insanity, by all means, good player, great for North America, but I just don't think he's the caliber that Jojo is. Jojo's a prodigy talent who's performing at close to his peak level right now, and it's just going to be a canyon there. Jungle Boogie has been performing well, so technically you could argue that TSM might have the advantage there a little bit, but Shaden is no rollover either, and when he gets to a best of 5 series, hopefully we'll see the best of him. In top lane, I don't think it has to be said, Hanser's towards the bottom 3 in the LCS right now, and Revenge, I know some people had him very high up early on, but personally, I haven't been all that impressed over the past few weeks with his performance. That said, I do think he can still show up in playoffs and have a good series, especially against TSM, and get that warm up. But I need to see him level up if EG wants to stand a chance at making a deeper run in Worlds beyond just trying to qualify, or in playoffs, besides just trying to qualify for Worlds. And very quickly in the bot lane, Ayla and Unforgiven have been incredible. Wild Turtle has been good, but not great. And Chime is decent, but ultimately I do think that this is not going to be a close series. I do think EG takes this 3-0, setting up a match with Cloud9 next week and sending TSM to play against Dignitas in the lower bracket. We'll discuss all those matchups next week. If you like the pit or any of my other content on this channel, be sure to drop a like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below what you want to see as we go into the offseason. I'm not sure how this series is going to look as we get into the 2 months that we have between now and Worlds, but I'll still have 4 videos a week every week.